All right, come on in, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome back to the Holler Hour, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 2 p.m. We got a nifty new background that Cassie made. Share the link if you would. Check out all the other hollers we're at the TN Holler. There's also all these other hollers across the state made possible by your generosity and support. Chip in $10 a month or more and get one of these sweet hats we're wearing. We really do appreciate it. Go to tnholler.com to support and there we go, to support us. Hope everybody's doing all right in this slow moving clown coup that we're currently witnessing. We're going to go through some stuff today just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, and then in a few minutes we're going to be joined by Rep John Ray Clemmons, who has thrown his hat in the ring for caucus chair for the House Democrats. So he'll explain to us hopefully what that actually means and entails and what the caucus chair actually does, and then hear what he thinks needs to happen differently for the party, since, you know, the truth is the Democrats didn't do that well here in Tennessee this time around. Things are moving a little bit bluer, but they could be a little bit better, right, Cassie?
Yeah. I mean, I just keep saying that, like, you know, progress takes a long time. Like, it's we didn't regress at all. We gained, you know, Heidi Campbell's seat, and then we also got John DeBerry out because he wasn't a true Democrat anyway. So, you know, we did have some gains, but we were expecting a lot more. And I think that just having a really strong party infrastructure, like Democratic Party infrastructure here in Tennessee, would do a lot to help that. So hopefully, you know, I like John Ray a lot, and so as caucus chair, you know, I'm excited to hear what he has to say about that. And that'll also lead into, you know, we've got the TNDP chair race coming up as well. So we'll be talking a lot about that.
Yeah, those are two races definitely to keep an eye on. I think Vincent Dixie is also interested in the caucus chair role. And then for the party chair, there's been a bunch of different people throwing their hats in the ring. I think we might actually have some sort of event on the Holler to try to figure out what's what. Meanwhile, on the other side of the aisle, just been an absolute disaster to watch. Tennessee Republicans, including Governor Lee, refuse to acknowledge that the election is over and that Joe Biden is president-elect. It's been really a disappointment, not at all a surprise. Oh, that's the mask mandate one. Never mind. He's disappointing us so many different ways.
Lots of levels.
It's hard to even keep up. This is the graphic we made of Governor Lee, the banana Republican, saying it's not clear yet what the outcome is. Then, of course, there's Senator Bill Hagerty doing the same thing. Lack of transparency and irregularities during the election are a cause of concern, says Dockers wearing Bill Hagerty. And then there's, of course, Marsha Blackburn saying it's a shame that we have to fight for a fair election in the greatest democracy in the world has ever known, but we do. And of course, we don't.
She's not wrong. Like, we have to fight for democracy from her, like from people like her.
Sure, we have to fight. Exactly, we have to fight against her for democracy. Right, that's exactly right. Meanwhile, she was then asked about it in person by a CBS reporter, which was really fun to watch her get bird dogged in Washington. This is her, I guess, yesterday or today.
Have you spoken to Vice President Biden yet? You won the election?
Deaf ears. Marsha Blackburn, deaf ears. Didn't hear the second part. Apparently only heard the first part. And, you know, she can't answer it because there's no good answer to that.
The pretentious walk, too.
Oh, yeah, holding up. What is she holding? Like coffee, water? Who knows? You know, they're making all these claims, obviously, but, you know, let's go ahead and talk about what they are and how full of shit they are, frankly. Here's one. This was what Trump was saying about Dominion deleted 2.7 million Trump votes. That's a software that he's talking about actually. And he's getting this from OANN, which is his new favorite network, OANN, because Fox News is too, I guess, moderate and centrist for him. But the truth is that
before he starts like competing with it.
Right. He's going to apparently take them on, but that is not at all what happened. And, we've since learned the New York Times went and looked into all of that. Dominion did not delete votes. That didn't happen. Another claim that they make is that Nevada, they had 3,000 cases of fraud. It turns out those were actually military families and not cases of fraud, that they're even saying in court. Here's one about Pennsylvania disputed ballots. In court, his lawyer is saying, are you claiming that these are fraudulent? And the lawyer is saying no. So in court, they're saying one thing. Outside of court, they're saying something completely different. And, it just shows that they don't actually mean any of this. And so what is really going on here, right? And I think it's pretty clear what's going on here. A few things, but, they're trying to delegitimize Biden. But also, this is a grift. The longer this goes on, the more fundraising emails they can send and the more they can pocket that money. And donations under $8,000 to this election defense fund are actually going right into the pockets of Trump and the RNC. And anything under $8,000 you send these people, you're just sending for him to pay off his debt. That's what you're doing. So, and the people that are condoning this behavior are contributing to that grift, and it's a grift. We've seen the New York Times headline said, election officials nationwide find no fraud. Here's Eric Trump posting a link of burning ballots, and then a city actually had to respond. And the city of Virginia Beach said those were sample ballots. So none of it is real. It's all bullshit. And these people should be ashamed of themselves for contributing to it. And they say, what's the end game? I think everybody's a little bit afraid that there is an end game, and that the end game is getting the state legislature in these states to challenge the result and have this thing end up in the Supreme Court, whereby they would throw out the result and appoint their own electors and elect Trump. But I don't think any serious people believe that would happen.
Yeah, I think, that's definitely one of the routes. I think at least in, my, just from what I've read about this, that is one of the things that could potentially happen. But I think there's also I think that at this point, it's pretty unlikely that it very, very, very unlikely that it would end up in the Supreme Court. And then there's this other option where, because if it did end up in any sort of court, like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin would be one of the state, it would be up to some of those state legislatures, and they're just not, I don't think that there would be, first of all, they don't have any grounds. And second, there's too much of a deficit to make up. And then the other option is that it somehow gets knocked into Congress with Mike Pence presiding over some ridiculous scenario. But I don't think any of that is going to happen. Yeah, I don't think that's a long shot. I agree. I think it's a grift. I think it's it definitely is delegitimizing our democracy. This doesn't bode well for the future, for future transitions. Just in terms of having that transition of power that is you can go back and forth on norms, but that's a norm that I think is really important.
Yeah. And it would be one thing if they had some evidence and some grounds, but they just don't. I mean,
they don't. They're getting laughed out of court.
He's 0 for 12 in court. Anyway, but the problem is, if this ever did depend on state legislators, we've seen in our state legislature here in Tennessee that, you can never go broke betting on them putting themselves first and, doing the wrong thing. So, let's bring in someone who deals with that way too much. And Rep. John Ray Clemmons, how are you, sir?
Hey, brother. How you doing?
We're good. We're just trying to make sense of everything here. I guess my first question to you would be, what do you think the Tennessee state Republicans would do if they were faced with the choice of having to put the country first or assigning their own electors and throwing out an election? Do you think they would do the right thing?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a trick question, right? They're going to do what is ever in their best interest and is going to help them get reelected. That's their first consideration every time. They've shown time and time again that what is in the best interest of their constituents or the people of Tennessee is never their first priority. I mean, we can start with Medicaid expansion and work our way on down, right?
Right.
you know.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us here. I know you just came out of something that you were doing, but I guess the question, or what I would want to hear you talk about a little bit, is, first of all, what does a caucus chair do?
Yeah, well, the caucus chair is actually the one that pretty much runs the caucus. We call the meetings, we organize all the meetings of the caucus, we strategize, we schedule, pretty much everything. We have the minority leader, and traditionally the minority leader has been kind of literally the floor leader, the head of kind of the policy side, and the caucus chairman traditionally has been the political side. So you have policy side, political side, and all the campaigns, all the fundraising for the caucus, protection of member seats, try to gain new seats, communications strategy, you name it. Caucus chairman controls, or should generally control, all of that.
And I know I'm not expecting you to speak ill of Mike or anything like that, but just what's your pitch to, the caucus, saying like, here's what I think we need to start doing differently. What are the ideas that you're bringing?
Yeah. So, Mike's not running again. So
right.
I'm not speaking ill of Mike or anybody in the past who's done anything. We've really benefited from some tremendous leadership in our caucus over the years. Mike's one of the smartest people you'll meet. He's done a great job representing his district in the state of Tennessee. One of the best guys you'll ever meet. We've had leader Craig Fitzhugh was in leadership. We've had Mike Turner was caucus chairman before Mike Stewart. I mean, we've had a series of decades of great leadership. What we need to do now is really modernize our campaign model and modernize how we do things. A lot of respects, we do things for better or worse, the same as the caucus was doing them. When I was political director at the state party back in 2003, our caucus is doing some of the same things we were doing then. And I think it's just a matter of thinking about things differently, approaching them differently. We need to have a better communication strategy. There is a huge swath of people across the Tennessee to whom we are not speaking, or we're not communicating to them well. We care about the issues they care about. Our priorities are the people of Tennessee's priorities, but for some reason that's not translating. So we must do a better job from the communication strategy standpoint of really speaking to all Tennesseans and finding that line. We got to, the reality is, if you look at the Brookings Institution report that just came out with the political economic breakdown between urban and suburban and rural areas, there are a lot of challenges facing us in the state of Tennessee, but we have a great opportunity. I think our challenges present us with great opportunity. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to really move this thing forward, take the next step. We got to remember, it's hard for people to complain about the fact that we haven't picked up seats, or we didn't pick up a seat in the state house this year. I mean, I think, if some factors had been different, if we'd done things a little bit different, I would say there were a couple in play. But COVID had a lot to say about that. And just, some of our candidates' unwillingness to go door to door versus their candidates' willingness to go door to door. That made a difference. So
is part of what, like, when you talk about modernization, is part of that like more of a focus on digital rather than, mailers, or is it not that simple?
Well, I mean, I think it's a lot of things. I'm one of these guys who has really trended away from mail and focused more on digital. I think, with mail, you're going to spend a lot of money to touch a lot of people, but you're going to get about 3 seconds from the mailbox to the trash can. Where digital, you can spend some more money, more strategically targeted, micro-targeted those populations, and really speak to them in a more personal manner than just the front and back of a piece of paper. So that's one aspect of it. I think modernization with regards to building data and improving our data sets and our voter file, we're way behind. You look at Republicans. Just to take since 2002, Republicans have had 3 statewide candidates every time, there's a statewide election up, every cycle. And they've been building that data every year. We've had 3 serious candidates until this year. And 2 of those were in 2018. One was in 2006. So we've lost the opportunity. I mean, it takes statewide legitimate races to build the data necessary to really hone in. I mean, I think if you're running a Republican campaign, if you're one of these Republican strategists, you know what the outcome of most elections is going to be, give it a take a few points just because your data is so good. And we're not there. We've got to do a better job of that. We need to work with the state party in that respect, the DLCC and the DNC, and make sure that we're building that relationship and cleaning up that data to move the party forward in the state of Tennessee. But again, all this stuff needs to fit together. You have to be communicating well. You have to be fundraising. And then you have to use the data that you have effectively, and then pair that with your traditional campaigning, your retail politics, your field game, all these things. It's all combined, work together. And I will say, I've been working in and around Tennessee politics since 1999 in an official or semi-official capacity. And so I know this state pretty well. I've seen it change. I read the writing on the wall, told the caucus back in, me and several others told the caucus back in 2003 that it was going to change. Some of them didn't want to hear it and didn't believe us, but unfortunately we were proven right. But I've been in all 95 counties. In the last 6 years alone, I've been in 44 counties because I always vowed, it always ticked me off when people would get elected to office and kind of kick the ladder out from under them, or they would forget who brought them to the dance. And so I always vowed that if I ever got elected, I would help build the parties. I would help county parties if they needed help, if they needed somebody to come out there for free and help them raise money in any respect or do whatever, that I would do it. And so 44 counties have taken me up on that offer, some of them multiple times in the last 6 years since I got elected, and I've been more than happy to do it. So I've built up the relationships, got the network. I know all the local office holders in most of these counties. And so we've got a bench out there. There are Democratic local office holders who would be incredible state candidates.
Right. And building that bench. We talk about that sometimes, Cassie, is the bench building part of things. One of the roles that Mike seems to have embraced, and I have no doubt that you would too, is, you end up being the one that breathes fire at the governor on behalf of the caucus and the Democrats. I mean, you all do that and you do it already, but
it's my favorite pastime.
I know it is your favorite pastime. So
he's such
I'm going to give you a chance.
Is the single worst governor we have had in my lifetime. I mean, he makes Sundquist look like a brilliant saint of policy. This guy, there's no strength to him, and in the polls, where Trump is incredibly popular, approval ratings in counties, Bill Lee is in the basement. I mean, he's in the cellar below the basement, and so. The guy he's done nothing impressive, and he continues to disappoint. And
what are some specifics? Let's rattle off some specifics that you are upset about him with him about.
Well, we can start with his number one agenda item coming into office with vouchers. I mean, there's no more toxic issue than vouchers in the state of Tennessee, and that's his biggest claim to education success. A bill that's been deemed unconstitutional. Then he's gone and criminalized access to reproductive health care services, even in cases of rape and incest. These people of Tennessee don't agree with that. And, you look and let's take the handling of the coronavirus. You want to talk about incompetency. I'm sitting here looking at my computer screen next to me here on my other monitor. I've got 100 emails from the last 2 days alone. People who applied for unemployment 3 months ago still don't have their check, and the program's already expired. Now, I've said it numerous times. I understood the high volume at the beginning of this coronavirus and dealing with the high volume of unemployment cases. That would take anybody for 6 weeks. Update the software, get the manpower to turn those around. But this is November. Yeah. This started in March. I mean, they continue to completely fail at every turn. And this governor, I mean, he is just, I've never seen a more vulnerable governor halfway through his first term in office than this governor, despite the fact that he's a Republican. The people of Tennessee just are not buying what he's selling. And then another example is Medicaid expansion. He continues to tote this party line and just talk about how cool it is to travel around or talk to the president on the phone. Like, of course he's going to talk to him. You're the governor of one of the reddest states in the country from an electoral map standpoint. And, that's what he's all excited about rather than figuring out how to get people food on the table or how to, improve the public schools, and he's cutting teacher pay raises. I mean, I can go on and on.
Just to bring it to, current events, what did you think of his, first of all, saying that mask mandates won't work despite the White House calling for it? He seems to be doing nothing.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, and doing nothing is his strategy. I mean, look, the people of Tennessee, we all should have seen this coming. You remember he's the only candidate I've ever seen that had no platform when he ran for office. He literally, from the primary until election day, he just had no platform. There was he would talk about different issues, but there was no substantive platform. And
he was just like a nice guy.
Everybody says, oh, but he's so nice.
Right.
Well, you want to talk about an overrated characteristic. How about we elect somebody who's kind and who's caring and, and empathetic? Nice. I mean, give me a break. This guy is not nice. Nothing he's doing is nice to teachers. Yeah. Nothing he's doing is nice to the vulnerable people across this state who are catching COVID and becoming hospitalized. I mean, I've got a relative in a hospital right now with COVID. Nothing he's doing is nice. What he's doing is damaging the reputation of this state. Meanwhile, he's bragging about being in a deer stand to try to, make some political point. It's a joke. He's making a mockery of the entire office. His own legislators up here don't take him seriously. They'll tell you behind closed doors what a joke he is to them. It continues to disappoint. But just to answer your question, yes, the caucus chairman is responsible for really taking some shots at leadership and the government. But I think there's a lot of things we can't do, obviously, because we're legislators and we have to work together. So there's lines we can't cross, and that's where the party has to pick up the ball and do it in a strategic manner, or others outside of that. We don't go so far, and I generally don't try to make it. A rule of thumb is you don't want to ever be personal. It's fair to hit on policy or missteps and things like that, but we don't go personal on it.
I don't know that you have any inside knowledge of this, but from where you're sitting, obviously everybody's big concern right now is, can this election be overturned? Do you feel like this is just a clown show, or is there a real threat here?
I mean, clown shows.
Or both.
Or both.
It's a sham to grift money out of Republicans. I mean, that's all it is. It's, he's raising money out there. Everybody, the big question was, well, how's Trump going to afford to do anything? Well, we should have known he was going to use his base and use some ridiculous accusations to raise money. What is it, like everything under $8,000 is paying taxes?
Yes. Exactly right.
It's just one big grift, and it has been since 2016. It's one of the most disappointing things I've ever seen out of the leader of the free world. That just continues to snowball. And, a lot of people are disappointed, and they're like, oh, well, why don't U.S. senators or Marsha Blackburn or even Lamar, who's not even running for re-election, which makes even less sense. But, they have potential political blowback if they come out against the president or, speak ill of him. So there's a little bitty piece that, like, okay, well, I understand that. But then you've got these guys down here at the state legislature, state senators who Donald Trump's never heard of and never going to give a second thought to, jumping on the bandwagon and putting a letter together. They have no exposure. There's nothing holding them back from saying, let's do the right thing here. Let's concede the election and let's move down the field and work together, united for the benefit of Tennessee's working families. But instead, they're going the complete opposite direction. I give them a little while. A lot of them are going to be running for the first time in the last 20 years. As soon as Donald Trump everything starts to surface about what happened behind the closed doors of his administration, I suspect they're all going to be running the opposite direction as fast as they can.
I hope so.
I would hope so too.
Yeah, well, Trump polls well, but I just think over time, I don't think history is going to be kind.
Right. I mean, he's been a New York City con man since the beginning, and they've fallen under his spell. And as he sort of fades into the background, which I hope he will, I think you're right. It's going to be like them waking up from a bad dream, and what have I done, kind of thing. But they've showed us who they really are. As we move towards this legislative session, and we'll get you out of here on this, like, what are the priorities for the day? Like, what are we to expect in the coming session? Obviously, I think vouchers is going to resurface. What are the threats, the biggest threats. I every time we hear the legislators is back in session, that feels like a threat. So what are the threats this time?
Well, I think the biggest threat we need to be prepared for is redistricting. You want to talk about a bare knuckle prize fight. Redistricting is going to be brutal. And we have not, Democrats, we have to look ourselves in the mirror. We have not earned the right to even be in the room when the lines are drawn. They've got the supermajority still. We should have spent the last 10 years trying to at least break the supermajority in the House. So our leverage is limited.
What can you do?
Get creative.
Yeah.
And that's what I plan on doing. And having a legal background and a legal understanding is a benefit of mine compared to some other people running for chairman, I think. And not being afraid to do what's necessary to try to hold on. I think we have some advantages. They've got to please 73 members. That's one of their biggest weaknesses, who want to eliminate as much blue from their own districts as possible. They've got the business community of Nashville, for instance. They talk about chopping up Nashville 4 different ways or whatever. I can tell you that businessmen and women in this city, red or blue, Democrat, Republican, whatever, do not want to deal with 2, 3, 4 congressmen. They want one congressman to deal with in Washington, D.C. in this city. So, you've got to take the political.
They're going to try to gerrymander Cooper out of his seat. Is that what you think is coming?
Well, it's always possible. They could have done it in 2011. They can do it now. I think our biggest, one of the biggest considerations will have to be to them is decide whether or not they want to pick a fight with the entire business community of Nashville, Tennessee, which can't be in any, Speaker Sexton surely doesn't want to do that. He's looking at running for governor in 4 years or so, I hear, or 6 years rather. And then all of them, what incentive would they have to really disappoint or make some of their donors in the city mad? The business community of this city, generally, regardless of party, will rally together in pretty overwhelming numbers and push back if they try to slice and dice this thing, I think. And I hope they do, because, nobody wants to deal with multiple congressmen from one city.
It seems like maybe the good news is that the good news is that we're already so gerrymandered. It's like, what can they really do?
Well, they can do a lot. Let me tell you. It'll put me in. They could put me in anybody else's district who's in office. They can combine our districts. They can do anything. They can't go outside of county lines, I don't think, here in Nashville, but they can certainly move these lines around and create headaches for a lot of people. And they can do a lot with these others. We've had a good opportunity to say, let's say, there's 5 competitive seats out there. They can do what it takes to make those less competitive, and they can put a lot of blue seats together in one district and make them right. They can get creative, and the software exists to do it.
What were some of the worst changes that they made 10 years ago, and how does that relate to what could be changed this time?
Well, what didn't they do? It was, to this day, I can't understand why the party or the caucus didn't sue them 10 years ago. I'll never understand that. And I know that my colleagues across the aisle in the legislature, their goal is if they don't get sued, they think they did it wrong. And for some reason, they didn't get sued last time. You can look at Senator Yarbrough's district in Nashville. You look at Senator Dickerson's district they drew specifically to elect him. They took an entire district in Shelby County and moved it to Knox County. They just to mess with some people, combined 2 representatives district in Hamilton County, which they can do. They can get really, really nasty if they want to play that game. And it takes very little creativity to do it with the software that exists.
Gotcha.
Well, that's frightening, and definitely feels like one of the things that went under discussed in this past election. I don't think a lot of people even know what that is and what that threat is. I don't think there's any real argument against fair districting, which is something that doesn't get talked about enough. And I think other states have actually considered that, but we really haven't here.
Yeah, Representative John Tanner used to be a big advocate for independent redistricting, even when Democrats were in charge. And maybe Senator Yarbrough and others have introduced legislation to that end here. But of course, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right. It has to be the party in power that wants to do these things. And, but then there's the flip side of, well, you start to look like, the puppy dog, if every time we get in there, we do the right thing. And every time they get in there, they don't, But I think if nothing else, this past 4 years has shown us how much weakness there is in the system, and where things need to change. It's been like not a litmus test, but a stress test, I guess, for the system. And if we can survive it, maybe in some ways it did us a favor. Just as a final thing, what is a pitch to people who, I think Democrats, the D brand, it has problems in Tennessee. Like, are there some quick things that you think people could be talking about differently or saying differently to help adjust how people view Democrats in Tennessee? I know that's a longer conversation, but everybody seems to have their take on that.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot. I mean, we can start with any number of things, but it's like I said, all of our priorities, healthcare, education, jobs. I mean, Democrats, those are our issues. Those are the things that we lead on and do the most work on, but yet that's not being communicated, and we're not breaking through into everyday Tennesseans, mostly in rural Tennessee, about those issues. And so we need to do a better job of communicating differently and speaking the language of those areas. And I think a big part of that is really just making sure that we're doing strong party building in the counties and all 95 counties to make sure that any misinformation, disinformation, misleading stuff is combated to correct the record, and that we are out there, showing our face, telling what we're doing and how we're trying to do it to improve their quality of life. Because the reality is that you guys do an incredible job, and you feel that, and Justin, I remember before you started the Holler and with others, that there's a huge communications void out there, that it was basically people were relying on syndicated stories from Nashville and what their representatives were telling them to their face, which often wasn't true.
Right.
And so it's really just bridging that gap and getting out there and communicating what's being done, how it's being done, and why it's being done. And we must do a better job of that. And it's disappointing to me, having grown up in rural Tennessee on a farm, to see people who I grew up with just have this completely distorted view of what Democrats are all about and what we're up here trying to do to improve their quality of life. It's just.
I have a pitch for you. We have a pitch for you. We talked about this yesterday, and I feel like there's one issue that kind of isn't stressed enough that could sort of tie a lot of this together and crosses party lines. It crosses class lines, it crosses color lines.
Let me guess.
Yes.
You guess.
Marijuana.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
I mean, I think just looking at it as a revitalization of rural Tennessee, the money that it would bring in, the freedom aspect of it, like, it just feels like really owning that. It could tie a lot of this together. Hands
down. And it's a perfect example. Sherry Jones carried a legalization bill for decades before Republicans even thought about it. They thought she was crazy. I have a whiteboard of policy in my office, and and legalization is at the top of the list because it bridges everybody. And it is a huge, for years, my family raised tobacco, and of course tobacco's gone, and their cash crops are really diminished. And so we have an opportunity to address mental health issues. We have an opportunity to build up rural Tennessee, save family farms. I mean, you can go down the line, and it is a win-win, not to mention the revenue
and the other part, the revenue is great. And the other part of it is, and look, Mississippi, they just voted for it. Like,
Montana.
But the other thing is, on both sides of this, there are one-issue voters that will come across for that.
Oh, yeah.
People really care. It's like the gun thing. Like, people really care about that. But on the flip side, I don't think there are one issue voters who are against it.
Yeah.
People are much more passionate for it than against it.
Oh, yeah, overwhelmingly. And it polls through the roof. I mean, and that's why you started to see.
That's why Dickerson ran on it.
Yeah,
so heavily.
Republicans have tried to co-op it a lot in Tennessee. But, it's interesting, and I get a lot of pushback on this because I always pushed back against Dickerson and those guys' bill, because what they're trying to do in typical Republican fashion is create a monopoly for 2 or 3 producer distributors. And so instead of
that, it can't be a Trojan horse like that.
It cannot be something you're going to create RJ Reynolds or whatever out of. It needs to be something that benefits family farmers and you
Right.
have
and people of color who have been hurt by
everyone.
this. Everybody has to have ownership, and
If
it's
you
really
start creating a monopoly like they wanted to, and that was my big pushback, and people
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
it was a risk for me to talk negatively about the bill because everybody's so in favor of it. I mean, it's literally one of the most popular things in the state, and but I have a real problem with creating a monopoly or
Mhm.
like that, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other states are doing this
No.
well. Learning curve for us. We just need to adopt a system that fits for Tennessee and will benefit the most people possible.
Mhm.
And it's a win-win-win.
well, that's our pitch is center that, like, not just one thing among many. Like, that is a thing that I think Democrats need to own in this state. And at this point, like, what do we got to lose?
We're going to be pushing weed here at the Holler.
Yes, we're pushing that. That's our thing now.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way. I'm not just some stoner saying that. I haven't smoked in a very long time. It's not my personal preference anymore. Once upon a time, but I just think there's enough benefits. There's medical benefits, mental health benefits. We're an opioid ravaged state. This is an alternative that really helps military people. It helps with PTSD. Like, this is something that really crosses a lot of lines. And, I would love to see you guys wrap your arms around it.
Since we haven't expanded Medicaid, like for pain management and treatment, like, obviously we need to do that. But
I know we're not trying to sell you anything you don't already believe, but
that's at the top of our list and has to be a center point. And that's one of those things where Republicans kind of caught onto it and they try to co-opt the issue and they let Dickerson do the lead on it because some of them were still so iffy about it. But I'm telling you, I've sat down. If everything else aside, I've sat down with enough veterans who've returned from war or active duty who have sing the praises of this. That alone,
that should be it.
Move the needle.
Absolutely.
But it's that and so much more. We're here right after Veterans Day, and so I think that's one of those things that you can't discount. You just sit down and talk to them and talk about what a difference it's made in their life to the extent they've been able to benefit from it, and that alone should move the needle for everyone.
Yeah. Well, we're going to leave you on that note. We appreciate what you're doing. We'll be watching when is the caucus vote?
December 7th.
December 7th. All right. So, and it's you and Vincent Dixie right now are the only two, right?
So far, we're the only ones in the race, and it's a friendly race. We're all on the same side here.
Yeah.
Who has the vision to move us forward and get this thing going in the right direction.
All right. Well, good luck in that, and come back and see us sometime. And thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. You can call on me anytime.
All right. Thanks, sir. All right. There's John Ray. I mean, we're gonna be pushing that because
we're gonna be the weed party here.
We're gonna become the weed guys because it's not because I just want to be able to smoke it. I won't even smoke it.
Although that would be funny for us to go live
blaze sessions, but no, it's really about redefining what it means to be a Democrat in Tennessee. I don't think people associate Democrats with that issue, and they should. And that issue is one that people are really passionate about. And, it's one that I think can move the needle in a lot of different directions, which, they got to be thinking differently. Like, we've been talking about Medicaid expansion for as long as I've been aware of things, and it hasn't worked necessarily. So, I think that has to be a part of it. And obviously it's the right thing to do. But, there needs to be something else that Democrats are really centering. And that feels like a winner.
Yeah. And I think that it would help with a generational shift too.
Right.
Like it would, and also just in terms of branding, not only is it a popular issue, but it's also kind of a younger, cooler issue, I guess, for people. So it's I think that it would not only does it pull really well, but it's also just in terms of rebranding, probably a really good issue to center.
And it's also an issue that exposes people. Okay, if you're against it, why are you against it?
Right.
Is the prison lobby giving you money? Yes, they probably are. Is Big Pharma giving you money? Yes, they probably are. The reasons for being against legalizing marijuana are not ideological anymore. This is a money thing. And that is why it hasn't moved. And so, I think picking that fight with them would be a good thing to do. Like, for instance, I've seen William Lamberth get asked about that in interviews, and we should post that interview of him because I'm always down to rip William Lamberth. But he talks about it, and he doesn't ever acknowledge that he gets money from Core Civic when he talks about that stuff. We're not for decriminalization, but oh, by the way, we're getting paid by the people who benefit from locking people up. Like, that's absurd. So, it's just a way to really expose people. And I think it's something that they should do. I see some comments here. Leland says a stoner party base, maybe eat up with the munchies rather than voting. That's a fair point.
You can multitask. I mean,
we should be able to multitask. And then I see Travis saying, I was in the Marines for 9 years, but I'm called a commie. Who knew? Just have to keep doing the right thing.
Who knew?
That's true. Yeah. Travis, appreciate you for making that sacrifice. And then we're going to end on this. Flo is saying, if you haven't signed up to support the Holler, make the monthly commitment. We did not put her up to that, but thank you, Flo. You're absolutely right. Every little bit helps. There are places, we have Hollers across the state. There are a couple places that I'd love to be by January. By the time the next session rolls around, we'd love to have one in Clarksville, in Murray County, or the next two. We actually had one pop up in Crossville, so check that out. And then we have them all over the state. I'm just trying to see if we missed anything. Oh, this is one thing I just wanted to mention. This is a Rutherford County School Board member.
Oh my God.
Somebody sent us this, Tammy Lynn Sharp. This is a 2015 post of her saying, get your kids out of public schools. The Supreme Court gave gays a no-holds-barred ticket to our children, bared ticket to our children. The worst indoctrination will be at the hands of gay teachers. This will never be restricted. She is currently a school board member, and I hope Rutherford County can do something about that.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that the folks down there can take that and run with it, because she should not be near a school board or a school with a 10-foot pole. No. That is just disgusting.
Really, really ugly. Yeah, I think that's about it. The ACA looks like it might survive that challenge. So that's some good news. And then just to end it on, this is Mike Rogers. He was on the Intelligence Committee. He's a former Republican representative, saying our adversaries aren't waiting for the transition to take place. He should be getting the president's daily briefing to know what the latest threats are. So basically, just pointing out that this petulant tantrum is actually putting our country at risk, and we need to fix that. Tuesdays, Thursdays, 2 p.m. We'll be back. Join us next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.